My name is Clara, I'm 27 years old, and my own sister announced she was pregnant with my fiancé's baby, just weeks before our wedding. Before I tell you how I turned my cancelled wedding into the biggest celebration of my life, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Thank you for being here, and I hope you're having a wonderful day. Please, feel free to comment and let me know what city you're watching from. It's nice to know who I'm sharing this with. It all came to a head on a Tuesday. I remember the air in my own Austin living room felt thick, heavy, like before a thunderstorm. They were all sitting there on my new sofa, the one Mark and I had picked out together. My mom, my dad, my younger sister Chloe, and my fiancé, Mark. They looked like they were staging an intervention, and it turns out, they were. But I wasn't the subject. I was the sacrifice. My mother started, her voice dripping with that fake, gentle tone she always used when she was about to ask for something unreasonable. Clara, honey. We need to talk about the wedding plans. There's been a development. I looked at Mark, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. He just stared at his hands, his knuckles white. That's when the dread, cold and sharp, pierced through me. Chloe, sitting next to him, had a tissue in her hand, dabbing at eyes that were perfectly dry. What is it? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. My dad cleared his throat. It's a delicate situation, Clara. We have to think about the family. And then my mother said the words that shattered my world into a million pieces. Chloe is pregnant, honey. And Mark is the father. The air left my lungs in a single, silent rush. The room tilted sideways. It felt like a physical blow, a punch to the gut that left me breathless. I stared at Mark, my Mark, the man I had loved since college, the man whose ring was on my finger, and I saw nothing but cowardice in his eyes. He couldn't even look at me. But they weren't finished. My mother, seeing my shock, moved in for the kill. We've discussed it, and we have a solution that will keep this from becoming a public embarrassment. We think it's for the best if Chloe joins you at the altar. As a co-bride. Co-bride. The word didn't even sound real. It was a grotesque, twisted fantasy. They wanted me to share my wedding day with my sister and the man who betrayed me, to legitimize their affair in front of everyone we knew. They wanted me to smile and pretend this was a beautiful, modern family arrangement. My mind went blank. The only thing I could think was, how? How did we get here? To understand the sheer audacity, the absolute insanity of what they were proposing, you have to understand what happened exactly 1 week ago. I had left work early that day, my mind buzzing with final wedding details. The caterer was confirmed, the flowers were ordered, and in 3 weeks, I was going to marry the love of my life. I walked into my parents' house, humming to myself, and went straight up to my old bedroom, where I was storing my wedding attire. And then I froze in the doorway. My heart stuttered, then hammered against my ribs. There, standing in front of my full-length mirror, was Chloe. She was draped in the ivory satin of my wedding after-party dress. It was a custom designer piece I'd spent months saving for, the one that made Mark's eyes light up when he saw the sketch. And dangling from her ears, catching the afternoon light, were my grandmother's diamond earrings. The heirlooms meant for me. The ones Grandma Eleanor promised would be mine on my wedding day. She was admiring herself, turning this way and that, completely oblivious. The sight of her in my dress, my earrings, something sacred and mine, it broke something inside me that had been cracking for years. What are you doing? My voice was quiet, but it cut through the silence like a knife. She jumped, her eyes wide, but there was no guilt in them. Only annoyance at being caught. My parents appeared in the doorway behind me. My mother's eyes scanned the scene, and a look of resignation, not surprise, crossed her face. Clara, she began, in that same placating voice. Don't be dramatic. She just wanted to see how it looked. She looks better in it anyway, Chloe muttered, running her hands down the satin. Mom agrees. That was it. 27 years of being told to share, to step aside, to be the bigger person, it all came to a boiling point in that one moment. I felt a hot flash crawl up my neck. I took a step into the room, my eyes locked on Chloe. "Take it off," I said, my voice dangerously low. "Now. Or I swear, I will call Mark and cancel this entire wedding." Silence. My parents looked shocked, my father started to bluster, but I didn't look at them. I just stared at Chloe. And as the silence stretched, a slow, mocking smile spread across her face, and a little laugh, a tiny, dismissive puff of air, escaped her lips. That little laugh. That was the sound that finally severed the last thread of hope I had for her. For 27 years, I had made excuses for Chloe. She's the younger sister. She's more sensitive. She just wants attention. But in that moment, seeing the smug satisfaction in her eyes as she stood there in my dress, my future, I knew. It wasn't about wanting attention. It was about taking what was mine. Something inside me went cold. The hot anger was replaced by an icy calm. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I simply took my phone out of my pocket, my thumb hovering over Mark's name. "Fine," I said, my voice flat. "I'll make the call." My mother's face went pale. "Clara, don't you dare. You wouldn't ruin your own wedding over a dress." "It's not about the dress," I said, looking straight at Chloe. "It's about respect. Something you know nothing about." That finally did it. Chloe's smirk vanished. With a furious hiss, she turned and stomped into the bathroom, slamming the door. A few minutes later, she came out, now in her own clothes, and threw my dress onto the bed. She ripped my grandmother's earrings from her ears and tossed them onto my dresser with enough force to make me wince. "Happy now?" she spat, before storming out of the room. My parents followed her, whispering placating words, not once looking back at me. I was left alone, standing in the wreckage, the beautiful ivory dress lying crumpled on my bed like a casualty of war. That confrontation brought us back to the present, to my living room, to the unbelievable demand that I share my wedding with the two people who had just destroyed my heart. My mind finally caught up with the present moment. The shock receded, and in its place, a tidal wave of rage washed over me. I stood up. My hands were shaking, but my voice was steady. "Get out." My mother started, "Clara, be reasonable." I said, "Get out." I screamed, the sound tearing from my throat. "All of you. Get out of my house. Now." They scrambled to their feet, shocked by my voice. My father muttered something about me being hysterical. Chloe looked terrified, for once. Mark, my fiancé, my ex-fiancé, finally looked at me, his eyes pleading. "Clara, please," he whispered. "We can talk about this." "There is nothing to talk about," I said, pointing to the door. "The engagement is over. The wedding is off. Now get out before I call the police." They left. The silence they left behind was deafening. I sank onto the sofa, the spot where Mark had been sitting still warm, and I finally broke. I sobbed until my throat was raw, until there were no tears left. The next morning, the campaign began. My phone started buzzing at 7 a.m. It was my Aunt Carol. I hadn't spoken to her in 6 months. "Clara," she said, her voice thick with disapproval. "Your mother told me everything. I cannot believe how you're treating your sister in her time of need. A baby is a blessing, and you are being so selfish." I was so stunned I couldn't even speak. I just hung up. An hour later, a text from my cousin. "Mom told me about Chloe and Mark. So sorry for you, but you need to be the bigger person here. It's about the baby now." It was a coordinated attack. My mother was spinning the story, painting me as a cold-hearted shrew who was punishing her pregnant, vulnerable sister. They were erasing my pain, my betrayal, and making Chloe the victim. The calls and texts kept coming, a relentless barrage of guilt and judgment from people who only had one side of the story. Mark tried a different tactic. He sent long, rambling emails filled with pathetic excuses. It was a mistake, Clara. I was stressed about the wedding, your father's business. Chloe was just there. It didn't mean anything. He wrote about the baby as if it were some inconvenient complication, not the product of a months-long affair. We have to do the right thing for the child's sake. A messy divorce from the start would be terrible for its college fund. He was already planning the finances of a life built on my heartbreak. The final straw came 2 days later. I had spent the weekend in a fog of grief, barely eating, just trying to process the implosion of my life. I went to my laptop to start the painful process of canceling everything. I opened my master wedding planning spreadsheet, a document I had spent hundreds of hours on, with every vendor, every contact, every payment detail meticulously logged. It was blank. Everything was gone. The vendor list, the budget, the guest list with all the addresses. Wiped clean. I felt a surge of panic, my blood running cold. I checked my cloud backup. Also gone. I checked the file history. The last modification was made yesterday afternoon, from an IP address I recognized. My parents' house. I called Chloe immediately. She answered, her voice syrupy sweet. Clara! I'm so glad you called. My spreadsheet, Chloe. It's gone. There was a pause. Oh my gosh, really? That's awful. You know, I was on your laptop yesterday. I was just trying to organize some of the photo folders for you to help out. I must have hit a wrong button. I am so sorry. Her voice was full of fake sympathy, but I could hear the lie. It wasn't an accident. It was sabotage. It was her way of erasing me, of making it impossible for me to move forward, of forcing me to rely on my mother's help and their twisted plan. She wanted to destroy every piece of the wedding that had been mine, so she could build her own on top of the ruins. I just sat there, phone in my hand, listening to her empty apology. The exhaustion was so profound, it felt like a physical weight pressing down on me, crushing the air from my lungs. I was alone, and I was losing. Losing the spreadsheet felt like the final, petty act of cruelty in a week full of them. It was one thing to steal my fiancé and my wedding, it was another to meticulously erase the evidence of my own hard work, my own joy. I was adrift, with no fight left in me. The constant barrage of calls from relatives had worn me down, and Mark's pathetic emails just fueled a dull, throbbing ache in my chest. I felt like I was drowning, and every time I tried to swim for the surface, another hand pushed me back down. Then, they took the fight public. My best friend, Jessica, sent me the screenshot. It was a post from Chloe's Instagram. A picture of her and Mark, his hand resting on her still flat stomach, both of them looking somberly at the camera. The caption was a masterpiece of manipulation. Sometimes life gives you an unexpected miracle that reveals who your true supporters are, she wrote. Mark and I are overjoyed to be starting a family. It's been a difficult time, and we are so sad that our happiness has been met with such anger and rejection from those we love most. We ask for your prayers as we navigate this journey and hope that one day, hearts will soften. Family should be about forgiveness. The comments were a flood of sympathy for her. So brave of you to share. Don't listen to the haters. Family is everything, she'll come around. They had built a narrative where I was the villain, a bitter, jealous monster standing in the way of their tragic love story. I felt sick to my stomach. I threw my phone across the room, watching it skid across the hardwood floor. I thought that was the worst it could get. I was wrong. 2 days later, Jessica called me, her voice urgent. Clara, turn on Channel 5. Now. My hands trembled as I found the remote. And there, on the screen, was my sister. She was sitting on the cheerful yellow sofa of a local morning show, the kind of show that usually featured segments on new recipes or community events. She was dabbing her eyes with a tissue, the host looking at her with a deeply sympathetic expression. "So, Chloe," the host said, her voice gentle. "You're saying that after you and your sister's fiancé found out you were expecting, your sister, she cancelled the wedding and cut you all off?" "Yes," Chloe whispered, her voice breaking. "All we wanted was to find a way to come together as a family. We even suggested we could all share the day, to celebrate both my new baby and her marriage. We just wanted to make it work. But she said she'd rather have no family at all than share her special day. After everything my parents have done for her, the salary she earns from the job my dad got her, the down payment on her house. I just don't understand." The host shook her head sadly. "Well, we are all hoping your sister finds it in her heart to forgive you." I just stared at the screen, my entire body numb. She had twisted everything. She made it sound like their affair was a noble sacrifice and their co-bride idea was a generous compromise. She even lied about my job and my house, making me sound like a spoiled, ungrateful brat who owed my entire life to my parents. The humiliation was absolute. It was a public execution, and my own family had handed her the gun. The fallout was immediate. My phone started ringing with numbers I didn't recognize, reporters from local news outlets. My social media was flooded with hateful comments from strangers. But the worst came the next day at work. I was a stylist for a high-end boutique, a job I had worked my way up to for 5 years, a job my dad had absolutely nothing to do with. My boss, Diana, called me into her office. The morning show segment was playing silently on her computer screen. Her face was grim. "Clara," she said, her voice leaving no room for argument. "Our clients are CEOs, senators' wives, old money families. They pay for discretion and perfection. They do not pay for this kind of public soap opera. I don't care what is happening in your personal life, but you need to get it under control. Keep it out of this studio, or you'll need to take a leave of absence." That was it. They had poisoned my family, my friendships, and now they were coming for my career. My entire life was contaminated by their lies. I left work early that day, my boss's words ringing in my ears. I got in my car and just started driving, with no destination in mind. I drove past the park where Mark had proposed, past the church where we were supposed to get married. Each landmark was a fresh stab of pain. I was completely, utterly alone. They had won. They had taken everything, and they had managed to convince the world, and even a part of me, that I was the one to blame. The sun began to set, painting the Austin sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, but I felt none of its beauty. I felt only a vast, empty darkness inside me. I had nothing left. No fiancé, no wedding, no family, and soon, maybe no job. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. There was only one person left in the world who had never asked me to be smaller, to share, to step aside. Without even thinking, I found myself on the familiar road leading out of the city, toward the small, quiet town where my grandma Eleanor lived. It was a last resort, a desperate, hopeless prayer. I didn't know what she could do, but I knew I couldn't be alone for one more minute. I pulled into her driveway, the gravel crunching under my tires, and just sat there for a long time, staring at the warm light glowing in her window. I rested my forehead against the cold glass of the driver's side window. The fight was gone. I was done. If you're still listening, please help me by liking this video and commenting the number 1 below. It lets me know you've given me a like, and it tells me that you're here with me on this journey. Your support is a huge encouragement for me to keep going. Please, comment with the number 1, and then listen as I tell you the rest of my story. The moment Grandma Eleanor opened the door, her warm, smiling face crumpled with concern. She didn't need to ask what was wrong. She just pulled me into her arms, and the dam I had been building for 2 weeks finally broke. I sobbed into her shoulder, a raw, ugly cry of a person who had reached their absolute limit. She just held me, stroking my hair, murmuring, I know, I know. Let it all out, my girl. She led me inside to her worn, comfortable floral sofa, wrapped a crocheted blanket around my shoulders, and made me a cup of hot tea with honey. She didn't press me for details. She just sat with me, her presence a silent, solid anchor in my swirling sea of misery. After my sobs subsided into shuddering breaths, I told her everything. The dress. The intervention. The pregnancy. The co-bride nightmare. The lies on television. The threat to my job. When I finished, my voice hoarse, she just nodded slowly, her eyes filled with a sad, ancient wisdom. I was afraid of this, she said quietly. This pattern. It has deep roots in our family. Pattern? What are you talking about? She sighed and got up, walking over to a bookshelf filled with old photo albums. She pulled one out and sat back down, opening it on her lap. She pointed to a black and white picture of two young women in 1960s-style dresses. One was my mother, looking shy and resentful. The other was my Aunt Louise, vibrant and smiling. Your mother, Grandma Eleanor said, was always the second daughter. Her older sister, Louise, was the star. The pretty one, the popular one. Your grandfather doted on her. Your mother spent her entire childhood in Louise's shadow. She flipped the page. At Louise's wedding, your mother showed up in a dress that was nearly white. She insisted on standing next to the bride in every single photo. When Louise objected, your grandfather told her not to be selfish, to let her sister have a little bit of the spotlight. Sound familiar? I stared at the picture, my blood running cold. They haven't spoken in 30 years, Grandma Eleanor finished. Your mother never learned how to be happy for someone else's joy. Instead, she learned how to steal a piece of it for herself. And she has taught Chloe to do the same thing. But she's done it better, twisting it so she can play the victim when she gets caught. It was a revelation. It didn't excuse my mother's cruelty, but for the first time, I understood the broken logic behind it. She wasn't just supporting Chloe, she was reliving her own childhood, trying to give Chloe the win she never had. And I was cast in the role of the selfish older sister who had to be taken down a peg. But what do I do, Grandma? I whispered. They have all the power. They're using my money for the wedding, they've turned everyone against me, they'll ruin my career. Grandma Eleanor closed the photo album and looked me straight in the eye. Her gaze was soft, but her voice was steel. No, my dear. They don't have the power. You do. You just don't know it yet. She stood up and went to her bedroom, returning with a small, ornate brass key. She pressed it into my palm. Tomorrow morning, she said, you are going to go to the downtown branch of Austin First National Bank. You are going to ask for Mr. Davison, the bank manager. You will give him this key. It opens safe deposit box number 412. The power to save yourself is in that box, Clara. But I can't give it to you. It is something you must be brave enough to take for yourself. The next morning, my heart hammered in my chest as I walked into the bank. Mr. Davison was an older man with kind eyes who remembered me from when I was a little girl. He led me into the vault, a massive, circular steel door swinging open to reveal walls of gleaming metal boxes. He unlocked box 412, pulled out a long, heavy metal container, and led me to a private viewing room. Inside the box was a thick leather folder. My hands trembled as I opened it. On top was the deed to my grandmother's house, the one I was just at. I scanned the document, and my breath caught in my throat. There, listed as co-owner, right next to Eleanor Vance, was my name, Clara Vance. It had been put in my name on my 25th birthday. Beneath that was a document for a family trust. My grandmother had established it years ago, funding it with a significant inheritance from her own parents. I read through the dense legal language, and my eyes landed on a specific clause. Upon my 27th birthday, I had become the primary executor of her estate. not my mother. Me. There were bank statements, investment portfolios, documents that laid out a level of financial independence I never knew I had. My grandmother hadn't just been saving for retirement, she had been building an ark for me. She had seen the storm coming from years away. I sat there for a long time, just staring at the papers. The weight of what she had done, the foresight, the quiet protection she had offered me all this time, was overwhelming. Mr. Davison had arranged for her lawyer to meet me there. The lawyer, a sharp woman named Mrs. Gable, walked me through everything. She explained that I had legal control over my grandmother's assets, and that I had my own significant portfolio, separate from anything my parents knew about. The joint wedding account your parents set up, Mrs. Gable said, looking at a statement I'd brought with me. You've contributed over $30,000 of your own salary to that, correct? Yes, I confirmed. They cannot legally stop you from withdrawing your own contributions, she said simply. And given the circumstances, which sound like fraud and breach of promise, we can ensure every penny is returned. I left the bank that day a different person. The despair was gone, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. My grandmother had given me more than just financial security, she had given me a weapon. She had given me the key, and I had turned it. Now, it was time to open the door and walk through it. I sat in my car, the leather folder on the passenger seat, and for the first time in 2 weeks, I smiled. A plan was beginning to form, a beautiful, perfect, and devastating plan. They thought they had backed me into a corner. They had no idea I was about to burn the whole house down. The first step of my plan required me to do the one thing I thought I'd never do again, call my mother. I took a deep breath, channeled every ounce of defeated, heartbroken daughter I could muster, and dialed her number. She picked up on the first ring. Clara? Oh, honey, I've been so worried. Mom, I said, my voice quiet and shaky. I think we need to talk. I've been thinking about what you said. About family. Maybe you're right. I could almost hear the triumphant smile in her voice. Oh, Clara, I knew you'd come around. We all just want what's best for everyone. I'm still hurt, I continued, letting a little sob catch in my throat. But I'm willing to meet. To discuss the new arrangement. Can you, Chloe, and Dad come over tomorrow night? We'll talk it through. I didn't mention Mark. He was a separate problem. Of course, sweetie. We'll be there. The next evening, they arrived, walking into my house with the smug, self-satisfied air of victors. Chloe was already talking about what kind of flowers would match her complexion. I let them talk, nodding along, playing the part of the dutiful daughter who had finally seen the error of her ways. Then, I turned to Chloe. You know, I said, my voice soft. If we're going to do this, we need to do it right. We need to see how the dresses look together. That after-party dress, maybe you should try it on one more time, so we can get proper measurements for alterations. We need to make sure it coordinates perfectly with my main gown. Chloe's eyes lit up. This was exactly what she wanted. That's a great idea. My mother beamed. See? This is so much better when we all work together. As Chloe preened in my bedroom, once again draped in my ivory satin dress and my grandmother's earrings, I pulled out my phone. Let's take some pictures, I said brightly. For the memory book. She posed dramatically, twirling, admiring herself in the mirror. My mother hovered nearby, adjusting the fabric, her smile wide and genuine. Click. 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 I took dozens of photos, capturing her triumphant smirk from every angle. These will be treasured forever, my mom said, squeezing my arm. Yes, I said, looking at the final, perfect shot on my phone screen. They will. The next morning, at precisely 8 a.m., my social media post went live. It wasn't angry. It was factual. It was a gallery titled, "A Story in Pictures, The Things We Take." The first picture was of a beautiful pair of designer shoes, pristine in their box. The second picture was of the same shoes, scuffed beyond repair, a heel broken, after Chloe had borrowed them for a date. The next was my vintage purse, before and after, now with makeup stains embedded in the leather. Then my cashmere sweater, stretched and misshapen. Then came the screenshots. Texts from my mother telling me to be the bigger person. A screenshot of my empty wedding spreadsheet. And finally, the main event. A series of crystal-clear, high-resolution photos I had taken just last night. There was Chloe, beaming in my wedding dress, dripping with my grandmother's diamonds. The caption was simple and devastating. For 27 years, I was told to share. To accommodate. To keep the peace. This was supposed to be my wedding dress for my wedding to my fiancé. This is my sister, who is now pregnant with my fiancé's child. My family's solution is that she should be my co-bride. They say this is about forgiveness. I say this is about boundaries. A bride deserves respect. A person deserves respect. This is not sharing. This is theft. #bride not bullied. The post exploded. Within an hour, it was shared hundreds of times. My professional colleagues, stylists, and designers rallied around me. The #bride not bullied started trending in Austin. My phone began vibrating nonstop, but I didn't look at it. I put it on silent and slid it into my desk drawer. The second part of my plan was already in motion. I had an 11 a.m. appointment at the bank with my lawyer, Mrs. Gable. I walked in, calm and prepared. I spread the documents across the manager's polished desk, printed copies of the wire transfers from my personal account to the joint wedding account, my original salary stubs proving the source of the funds, and a signed affidavit from Mrs. Gable. These payments, totaling $32,000, were made under false pretenses for a wedding that is not happening as agreed, I explained calmly. The co-signer on the account, my mother, is attempting to misappropriate these funds for an event I have not consented to. I am formally requesting a full refund of my contributions to my personal account, effective immediately. The bank manager reviewed the paperwork, nodding slowly. My father had a good relationship with this bank, he thought his influence was everything. But influence crumbles in the face of legal documentation. Everything appears to be in order, Ms. Vance, he said. 20 minutes later, I walked out of the bank. The email confirmation chimed on my phone. $32,000 was back in my account. My parents' primary source of leverage, my own money, was gone. They no longer controlled my wedding fund. They no longer controlled me. The final step was the most satisfying. I called every single vendor. The venue, the caterer, the florist, the photographer. One by one, I explained the situation. To the venue manager, I said, the Carter Vance wedding is officially cancelled. However, I would like to book the venue for the same date for a private event. A celebration of independence. The deposit on file can be transferred. From this moment on, you will only take instructions from me or my maid of honor, Jessica. Any communication from my parents or sister is to be ignored. One by one, they agreed, shocked but professional. They had seen my social media post. They understood. That evening, I sent one final, group email to my parents, Chloe, and Mark. The subject line was wedding update. The body of the email was short. All vendor contracts have been cancelled and rebooked under my sole authority. The funds for the wedding have been moved to an account you do not have access to. The event on October 25th will proceed, but it will not be a wedding. Your invitations have been rescinded. Please do not attempt to attend. This is the last communication you will receive from me regarding this matter. I hit send. And for the first time in my life, I felt the glorious, intoxicating rush of true freedom. The war was over. And I had won. The day that was supposed to be my wedding day dawned bright and clear. The Texas sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue. I woke up not with nerves, but with a profound sense of peace. There was no chaos, no drama, no walking on eggshells. There was just the quiet hum of anticipation for a day that was now completely, unapologetically mine. I got ready with my best friend, Jessica, and my grandma Eleanor in a beautiful suite at the venue. There was no white lace dress. Instead, I had bought the most stunning evening gown I had ever seen, a deep emerald green silk that shimmered with every movement. It was the color of new beginnings, of life. As I fastened my grandmother's diamond earrings, the ones Chloe had worn, they felt different. They no longer felt like just heirlooms, they felt like armor. "You look magnificent," Grandma Eleanor said, her eyes misty. "You look like yourself." Jessica grinned. "You look like a queen who is about to address her loyal subjects." We walked down to the main ballroom an hour before the party was set to begin. It was perfect. The florists had replaced the white roses with vibrant, colorful arrangements. The caterers were setting up stations with my favorite foods. The DJ was setting up a playlist that was all my own, no slow, sappy love songs. This wasn't a wedding reception. It was a victory party. My security team, a group of Jessica's large, intimidating, but very charming friends in sharp suits, were already at their posts. I gave them their instructions one last time. "For names are not on the list," I said, handing them a piece of paper. "My parents, my sister, and Mark. Under no circumstances are they to be allowed inside. Be polite, but be firm. If they cause a scene, call the police." The lead guard, a mountain of a man named Ben, just nodded. "Consider it handled, Clara." Guests began to arrive, my true friends, my supportive colleagues, my extended family who had called to check on me after seeing my post. There were hugs and laughter and a few tears. The room filled with a warmth and energy that was a world away from the tense, obligatory feeling of the wedding I had been planning. Then, just as the party was getting into full swing, Ben's voice came through my small earpiece. "They're here." I took a deep breath and walked toward the grand glass doors of the foyer. And there they were. My father, in his tuxedo. My mother, in a pastel mother-of-the-bride dress. And Chloe, standing between them, wearing a white dress that was suspiciously similar to my original wedding gown. She was holding a small bouquet of white flowers. Standing awkwardly behind them was Mark, looking pale and miserable in his suit. They had come dressed for a wedding. They had actually believed they could show up and force their way back into the narrative. Ben was standing in front of them, blocking the entrance, his arms crossed over his massive chest. "I'm sorry, sir," he was saying politely. "Your names are not on the guest list." "Don't be ridiculous," my father blustered, waving a hand dismissively. "I'm the father of the bride. We paid for half of this wedding." "Actually," I said, stepping out into the foyer. "You didn't." They all turned to look at me. The color drained from my mother's face. Chloe's mouth formed a perfect O of surprise. They looked at my emerald green dress, at the party raging behind me, and the reality of the situation finally seemed to hit them. "Clara," my mother stammered. "What is the meaning of this? Where is your dress?" "Chloe is ready." "This is not a wedding, Mom," I said, my voice calm and even. "This is a private party. And you are not invited. You can't do this." Chloe shrieked, her voice cracking. "You're ruining my life. What about my baby?" "Your baby," I said, looking her dead in the eye, "is the consequence of your actions. Not my responsibility. And certainly not my problem to solve on what was supposed to be my wedding day." I turned to Mark. He flinched under my gaze. "I hope you're happy, Mark. This is the family you chose. Enjoy it." Then I looked back at my parents. "I believe you've been asked to leave." My father's face was turning a dangerous shade of purple. He took a step forward, but Ben subtly shifted his weight, and my father thought better of it. Defeated, they turned and walked away, a pathetic, overdressed parade of failure. I walked back into my party, and a cheer went up from my friends who had witnessed the scene. Jessica handed me a glass of champagne. Later that evening, I stood on the small stage, looking out at the faces of the people who truly loved me. "I'd like to make a toast," I said, my voice ringing clear and strong through the ballroom. "Some of you know that today was supposed to be a very different day. But I've learned that sometimes, the best laid plans need to be torn up, burned, and thrown away to make room for something better. This isn't a celebration of a marriage. It's a celebration of independence. It's a celebration of self-respect. And it's a thank you to all of you, my true family, for supporting me. To new beginnings, and to never, ever letting anyone steal your light." The room erupted in applause. As I stepped off the stage, I caught my reflection in a mirror. I was smiling, truly smiling. And in that moment, I had never felt more beautiful or more free. The party was everything I could have hoped for. It was a night of dancing, laughter, and genuine connection. For the first time in months, I didn't feel the weight of my family's expectations or the sting of betrayal. I just felt light. But I knew there would be one final battle. It came around 10 p.m. My phone, which I'd left in the bridal suite, started buzzing. Jessica brought it to me. It was my father. I knew if I didn't answer, he would just cause a scene outside. I motioned to Jessica that I was okay and stepped into a small, quiet office off the main hall. "What?" I answered, my voice flat. "Clara Elizabeth, you have humiliated this family in front of God and everyone," he roared, his voice distorted with rage. "After everything we have done for you, this is how you repay us? This public disgrace? You will regret this. Your reputation in this city will be ruined." In the background, I could hear my mother wailing dramatically. "Our baby girl, throwing us out like trash, what will people say?" I leaned against the cool wall of the office, listening to them. A few months ago, this performance would have gutted me. His anger would have made me shrink, her tears would have activated a lifetime of guilt. But now, it was like watching a play where I already knew the ending. The actors were loud, but their words had no power. Their authority over me had crumbled. It was all just noise. I listened patiently as he ranted for another 2 minutes about family honor, about the sacrifices they'd made, about how Chloe was now an emotional wreck because of my selfishness. When he finally paused to take a breath, I spoke. My voice was quiet, devoid of the anger he was trying so hard to provoke. "Are you done?" The question threw him off. "What? What did you say?" "I asked if you were done," I repeated calmly. "Because if you are, I have something to say. For years, I thought your love was conditional. I thought I had to earn it by being quiet, by being agreeable, by making myself smaller to make Chloe feel bigger. But tonight, you've shown me that it wasn't conditional at all. It was never there to begin with. You don't love me. You love the idea of a daughter who does what she's told." I could hear my mother gasp on the extension. "So, thank you," I continued, the words coming easily now. "Thank you for showing me exactly who you are. Thank you for making a choice so monstrous that it severed any obligation I ever felt towards you. You didn't just break my heart, you set me free. And I will not spend one more second of my life trying to earn the approval of people who require my humiliation as the price of admission to the family. So, Dad, Mom, thank you. And goodbye." Before he could respond, I ended the call. My thumb hovered over his contact name. I pressed block. Then I found my mother's name. Block. Then Chloe's. Block. A strange sense of peace settled over me. It was done. A 27-year-long divorce from my family, finalized in a few taps on a screen. My phone buzzed one last time. A text from Mark. Clara, I know I don't deserve it, but please talk to me. What they did tonight was wrong. I never wanted this. I looked at the text, and I felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness. Just a profound, empty pity for him. He was weak. He had allowed my family to orchestrate this disaster because he was too much of a coward to tell the truth. He would spend the rest of his life being managed by my mother and manipulated by Chloe. That was his prison. It wasn't mine anymore. I typed back a short reply. The person you need to talk to is Chloe. She's the mother of your child. That's your life now, Mark. I wish you luck with it. Then, I blocked his number, too. I walked out of the office and back into the vibrant, joyful noise of my party. I walked straight onto the dance floor where my friends were celebrating. Jessica grabbed my hand, pulling me into the circle. The music was loud, the lights were bright, and I was surrounded by people who saw me for who I was. I threw my head back and laughed, a real, genuine laugh that came from the deepest part of my soul. The final chords had been cut. The chapter was closed. I was finally, completely, gloriously free. 6 months later, I stood by the large bay window of my new apartment in Denver, Colorado, watching snow flurries spiral down onto the quiet street. The move had been a leap of faith, a clean break from the ghosts of Austin. 3 states and 1,000 miles now separated me from my old life, and the distance felt like pure, clean oxygen. More coffee? I turned to see my best friend, Jessica, holding out a steaming mug. She had flown in for the weekend to help me put the finishing touches on my new styling studio, which was set to open downtown next week. She had been my rock through everything, the sister I chose, not the one I was given. Please, I said, taking the mug. Its warmth spread through my cold hands. I was just thinking how quiet it is here. No unexpected visits. No drama. No one borrowing my things. Jessica settled beside me on the window seat. Speaking of which, have you heard from them? I shook my head. Not a word. And I'm not looking for one. Grandma Eleanor said she heard through the grapevine that Chloe had the baby, a boy. And that she and Mark are living in my parents' guest house. A prison of their own making, Jessica said, sipping her coffee. Good. Let them have it. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Grandma Eleanor had been my lifeline. After the party, she helped me plan my exit from Austin. We found a lovely assisted living community for her just 10 minutes from my new place in Denver. Having her close was the greatest gift. She was the only piece of my past I had chosen to bring into my future. My inheritance from her, the one she'd given me early, was the foundation on which I was building this new life, a life where I answered to no one but myself. My new styling studio, Vance Vanguard, was a dream come true. The public fallout from my story in Austin had an unexpected side effect. Women, especially those from my target demographic, started seeking me out. They saw me not as a victim, but as someone who had refused to be silenced. My story of taking back my power resonated with them. My client list was already full before I had even officially opened my doors. I was no longer just an employee getting a salary, I was an owner, building my own legacy. The final piece of closure came in an unexpected way. A package arrived last week, with no return address. Inside was my childhood diary. Flipping through its pages, I saw my own adolescent handwriting documenting a long list of borrowed items that never came back, of times I felt overshadowed. A small, folded note fell out from between the pages. It was from my mother. Perhaps we should have listened, it read. It wasn't an apology. Not really. There was no accountability, no remorse for the pain she had caused. But it was an acknowledgement. A tiny crack in the fortress of her denial. I placed the diary on a bookshelf in my new home office. A chapter closed, but not forgotten. A reminder of the strength I never knew I had. That evening, as Jessica and I celebrated the unofficial opening of my studio with a bottle of champagne, my phone sat quietly on the counter. There were no angry calls to answer, no manipulative texts to deflect. There was only the quiet hum of a life I had built myself, on my own terms. Looking around my beautiful new space, I thought about the woman I was 6 months ago, the one crying in her car outside her grandmother's house. I wished I could go back and tell her that her world wasn't ending, it was just beginning. I lost a wedding, but I found myself. And that was a trade I'd make again every single time. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It means the world to me that you've been here through all of it. I'd love to know, have you ever had a moment in your life where you finally had to say enough is enough? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. And if my story resonated with you, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more.